Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. I can't quite believe it, but the show is 101 episodes old now. However, for listeners who might be new to all this, the idea is I speak to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their lives and careers. Before we start, I'm delighted that the headline sponsor for this series of the podcast and the upcoming Material Matters Fair, taking place from the 20th to the 23rd of September at Barge House, Oxo Tower Wharf, is Burt Frank. The premium British lighting brand, based in London and Birmingham, will mark its 10th anniversary this month at the London Design Festival, with new product launches that celebrate the considered use of exceptional materials, in addition to reimagining some of its most popular designs into new forms. Together, these launches outline an exciting new chapter for the brand that has championed the globally recognised hallmarks of British design: quality, craftsmanship and innovation since its inception. So, my guest this week is Marie Carlisle. Marie is CEO and co-founder of social enterprise and material matters exhibitor Goldfinger. The organisation opened its doors at the foot of West London's Trellick Tower in 2013 and makes high-end furniture from wood that has often been reclaimed in its workshop. Not only that, but it has a showroom and cafe as well as an academy that teaches marginalised young people the craft of woodworking through its apprenticeship programme. It's a fascinating and I think important place. Marie, how are you? Thank you very much for doing this.
Hi, Grant. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
You don't look like you're in the UK. Can I ask where you might be?
I'm actually in France, where I'm from, where a lot of my family are. So I'm working from here at the moment in the south of France.
Very nice. So we're going to cheat a little bit because we're talking over Zoom. Maybe you can describe the Goldfinger workshop and cafe for our listeners and how the setup kind of works.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a very unique space underneath the Trellick Tower that is 4,000 square foot. And on the ground floor, we have this amazing community cafe run by our partner chefs who are Sicilian, Panella, with whom we run our monthly food initiative called the People's Kitchen.
We will get into that.
Yeah, exactly. A bit more on that later. But that's really, in many ways, the heart of it, bringing people in. We then have our showroom and offices on the same level. And then underneath is the true beating heart of the organization, which is the workshop. We have a 2,000 square foot workshop with anywhere between 4 to 6 makers working in there. And we also run our academy programs in there. So last week, we just had our Goldfinger Academy traineeship programs where we get young people out of work and education into our workshops to come and see it. So it's all in one, which is very unique and always fun for people to come and see that.
It is a fascinating place. There's no question. I mean, I'm intrigued by your location because Trellick Tower, famously designed by Erno Goldfinger, opened in 1972. It's either seen as wildly bombastic or iconic, depending on your point of view. And it's a building whose reputation has been transformed since it opened. It was wildly loathed. It's became really hugely fashionable in the 90s. I think I'm correct in saying that the majority of the apartments are social housing, but there are a significant number of privately owned flats. And I guess I'm interested to know how the building shaped your brand. I mean, obviously it's responsible for your name in some part, but how else has it affected what you do?
You're so right. I mean, it really has been our muse in so many ways. It really shaped the business. Yes, we had an idea for what the business model around reuse, around design, around social impact and the circular economy, but so much of it has really been driven by our home. And I think one of the ways in which it has, other than obviously give us our name and the inspiration we've taken from this architect who was also a furniture designer himself, is really the effect, as you said, on, people's perceptions. It was hated and it is now loved, or at least by many, enough for it to be grade 2 listed. And how quickly perception can change just when enough people decide it is of value, and just how sometimes arbitrary what we deem as waste is. One of our mottos at Goldfinger is waste is just a resource in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
Waste is really just a man-made concept. When you look at nature, it doesn't exist. It's very, very cyclical. And I think the Trellick Tower shows us that, how even, a building that can be hated and, threat about tearing it down can go from that to being a grade 2 listed building that is now a treasured monument. And I think that's really what inspired us. If that can happen with a building in less than 30 years, what can we do in terms of the circular economy and making waste grade 2 listed, making waste truly desirable, aspirational, and that's where that kind of injection of design and creativity and craft came into our business model to elevate what others are calling waste. I put in inverted commas.
Very good. I mean, I think what Trellick shows is that our notions of beauty are fluid.
Exactly.
And they do change, and they can change quite quickly. I mean, interestingly, my guest for the 100th episode of this podcast was Michael Merritt, who's a huge Goldfinger fan and has done products based around Goldfinger's work. So I don't just throw the shit together is what I've decided as you were saying that. I mean, can we talk a little bit about the area as a whole? Because the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea has come up in this podcast before when we talked about Grenfell Tower. There's a huge disparity of wealth in the area. It contains some of the richest people in the country, some of the richest people in the world, but there's also huge poverty. Are you trying to bridge that divide with what you do?
Very much so. I think that's another part of our business model, which has been inspired more than the building, but by that whole locality. And North Kensington is really the locality I speak about here. And you've described it very aptly, this sort of tale of two cities, extreme wealth next to extreme poverty. And we really do aim to be a bridge between those two communities rather than usually quite polarizing or alienating or just apathy, just no contact whatsoever. And we do this through so many ways, but our People's Kitchen is a very good example. On the one hand, we're connecting so the more affluent types to be volunteers and donors and really actively involved in this meal program, but then the local residents of Trellick Tower, and all the neighboring social housing blocks like Hazelwood and Homefield come to have a free meal. And then everybody sits at a table together. It's not sort of people on different levels. There's very much a sense of coming together, and there's a lot of meaning and value that is shared between those two communities. And likewise with our academy. So on the one hand, we are obviously selling our products, which are on the high end design, luxury products side of things, but then it's creating jobs and training opportunities for young people in that borough. And so again, it's really about bringing those populations together.
Well, we'll get into the other aspects of what you do a bit later on, I suspect, but I'm keen, because of the nature of this podcast and its title, to talk about the workshop in the first instance, which seems to me to be the bedrock of everything that you do. Now, I've read a few pieces that describe what you did in the early days as upcycling, which isn't necessarily a term that is used that much any longer. Now you're known for working with wood, and I'm wondering why that material.
Yes, wood is really our passion. And I mean, it has to start with the fact that I love wood personally. I love trees. I've always been very fascinated and taken. I think trees have always been my sanctuary and sacred place. I grew up in rural Hong Kong, which most people don't believe exists, but it does. And spent my afternoons after school climbing trees and picking seashells on the beach. And I've always found them just fascinating creatures, really, beings. And I then met my co-founder at university, and he was a really keen woodworker. And so the two things came together. I think wood had gone through a bit of a period where people were thinking, oh, it's not such a noble material. It's a bit rough. It's a bit this. It's a bit passé. And actually, we just felt that from a circular economy perspective, wood is infinitely recyclable. So there's something, solid timbers reveal, you sand the surface, you get a new surface. It's so incredibly versatile and lends itself to the circular economy with good, high quality waste, solid timber. There is really infinite possible reuses, which is not the case with a lot of man-made composites. So that was one of them. But then it's just the beauty of it, the natural character of wood. I'm a yoga teacher on the side and have always been fascinated by wellbeing.
I know your Instagram page. You are very bendy. I mean, I hope that's all right to say, but blimey, you can do, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, so exactly. That's another passion. But that connection with well-being is very much something that I think wood contributes to. The more I've got into it, I've realized just, there is a natural tendency. We gravitate towards trees, towards woods, towards forests, whether indoors or outdoors, because it makes us feel good. And there's countless research that I love, from Japan, from Norway. A lot of Scandinavian countries have really looked at it in depth and seeing that connection with our vitals of things like blood pressure actually staying stable or even decreasing when in contact with a wooden piece of furniture versus it increasing with metal or plastic, which is just incredible. That's something that really It's a sort of a full circle. Environmentally, it's a really interesting material from, as I said, about the circular economy, but also there's a well-being aspect, which I think has been overlooked. And it's finally kind of becoming a lot more center stage, where interior design and architecture for well-being is taking center stage again, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. And you have this manifesto on the wall of your showroom. I kind of feel one of us should read it. It's probably better coming from you, quite frankly.
I'd be delighted.
Do you know it off by heart, or do you have it to hand, or do you keep it with you at all times?
I do have it to hand. I do know most of it by heart. We have it in our showroom like a good manifesto. It really is the kind of beating heartbeat of the business. And we actually wrote it as a team together during the lockdown.
It was a lockdown manifesto.
Yeah, lockdown manifesto. That was really when we consolidated the who are we and why do we do what we do and why do we care? And it really has anchored what we do, our strategy, you know, how we launch our products. And so, yes, I'd be very happy to read it to you.
Well, let's hear it then, Marie. Absolutely. It's all yours.
So, from tree to table, our future depends on trees. Use wood thoughtfully. Your table was once a tree. Someday it could be something else. Make sure your wood hasn't traveled too far. Reuse where possible. Demand that it's sustainably grown. Buy less, use your hands more. Question how things are made and what they're made from. Learn how to make something. It's revolutionary. Invest in the traditions of craftsmanship. Good design made well lasts longer. Invite others to your table. Enduring beauty is meant to be shared. Create spaces that feed the soul. Let's reset our relationship to the living world. Our everyday choices have power. Choose as if all life depends on it.
Very good. So this is the mantra your brand lives by.
Indeed. Exactly. And trees are, that exactly at the core of it. They inspire us and guide us in many ways. So, yes, and it's often a resource that is largely undervalued in our supply chains. And so we're really wanting to change that.
So you source your wood from different places, don't you? I mean, some of it is reclaimed. You've talked in the past in interviews about teak lab benches you received from Imperial College London. Other sources you've described as treecycled, which isn't a term I'd necessarily come across before. So what is treecycling?
So treecycling is really a term that we have come up and hope to garner more adoption for trees that have fallen for natural reasons. They've fallen or are having to be felled for reasons outside of furniture production or use. They are coming down because of either disease, think of ash dieback, Dutch elm disease, urban development, and weather-related conditions, whether it's droughts or storms. Amazingly, in London alone, there are about 5,000 mature trees that are felled or fall for all of these reasons. And do you want to hazard a guess what happens to them, most of them, if it weren't for this intervention?
Well, I would guess they're probably burned.
Indeed, which is just harrowing. It's sad that many people can answer that question because it really shouldn't be happening. But yes, they're burned for biofuel, they're burned for biomass. There's all sorts of reasons why that is happening. But on the other hand, Britain is the second largest importer of timber after China in the world.
Which is after China, which is madness. I mean, it's just bizarre, isn't it?
Insane. So Ronan Britain, which is a body that manages, responsibly managed woodlands in the UK, that over 80% of timber in the UK is imported. And then on the other hand, we are burning the trees that are on our doorstep. Why does this make any sense? And so we are trying to reduce our reliance on timber imports and make sure that we are utilizing the trees that are falling down naturally. So that's treecycling.
Who do you have to go to find these trees that would otherwise be burned? Are these local councils? How does the wood arrive to you?
So we've developed some fantastic partnerships with small organizations and equally passionate organizations like ourselves, such as Fallen and Felled, whom you may have heard of, who dedicate their business to that, the processing of the timber. And so what we do as a collaborative is try to join up public and private landowners. So yes, councils, but also larger estates. There are a lot of different actors in that to try to connect them with the sawmills who can then connect them to people who are selling it. Because that is the bit that has disappeared in the country, is that supply chain to actually convert that resource into something that is sellable. Because when the tree comes down, it's just a problem. It's not actually a resource. It's just someone was like, get rid of this thing. And it's very costly to get it to a stage where it is seasoned, it is, cut into planks. And that's the tricky bit in the supply chain, that we've had to really pool together a lot of resources and just a lot of joint efforts really between small organizations who are trying to go against the grain and make sure that there's enough British timber and making sure that it's sequestered in the timber as furniture for generations to come.
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned Grown in Britain. I know you work with them. Can we talk about your relationship with that organization? Because that's beyond tree cycling, that you do more with them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Tree cycling is a next level. It's a challenging one to certify because a lot of these trees are sort of out of woodlands. They're urban. They're not managed in that classic way. Whereas Grown in Britain is responsibly managed woodlands across the UK. So it's like the FSC and PFC labels that we are very familiar with, that provides the sustainability and the legality credentials of it. But what it does on top of that, which I think is so fundamentally vital and lacking from the other frameworks, is it gives you provenance. It's going to tell you exactly where that tree came from. Because the problem with some of the other frameworks is that your wood could have been sustainably grown and legally grown and felled and logged and etc. However, it could be coming from the other side of the world. So there's a big part of the sustainability equation, which is transport miles, which has been removed from it.
So customers know exactly where their furniture came from.
Exactly. Where their tree once grew. Exactly.
So how do you work? There are commissions for architects and designers, but you produce your own ranges?
Both. Predominantly the former. The bulk of our work is collaborating with interior designers and architects, working on client-led briefs. Most recently, we worked with Holland Harvey Architects, and we've worked with numerous times on lots of amazing projects, including Inhabit Hotels, a very sustainability and wellness-driven hotel. There's two of them, actually, one in Paddington and one near Hyde Park. But most recently, we worked on the Tate Modern new restaurant, the Corner Project, which was very, very exciting. All made from treecycled ash. So all ash from London and beyond, UK definitely, that were at risk of being affected by ash dieback. And been transformed into this timeless furniture that now sits in the Tate Modern's new restaurant.
Well, I think it's worth pointing out that this is high-end furniture, isn't it? I mean, I think there's always a danger that when you talk about reclaimed wood, people kind of think it's cheap. And maybe upcycling has that kind of reputation, possibly unfairly as well, I would posit. So, yeah, how do you persuade people that what you're making actually is valuable?
In the early years, that was the biggest challenge. When my co-founder moved on and I took over about 2017, 2018, we really stripped out our upcycling from our vernacular. I was like, no more upcycling. There are connotations with that. And it's a shame because it's a good word. There's nothing wrong with the word in itself.
I was going to say there are upcyclers shaking their fists at their radios
it's
right now.
It's a great word. It's a wonderful concept. It is what we do. However, there is a connotation of not design-led, things a bit thrown together, recuperating and salvaging in a way that isn't necessarily very thoughtful, even though it has a place. It's not to criticize the upcycling movement or all the fantastic craftspeople that sort of operate in that field, but we really wanted to have this design-led approach to working with material that just happened to have had another life before, but really designing from scratch. So the final product looks completely new, albeit perhaps with a bit more character because the wood, has this patina. But often when we sand it back, no one will ever be able to tell if we did a kind of test which ones are reclaimed and which ones are Grown in Britain or treecycled. No one can tell. And that's got to do with the high level of craftsmanship and skill and talent that we have in the workshop.
So how many people are in that workshop?
Ranging, around 4. More or less, a mix of designers and makers, some straddling both. It's a relatively small workshop, but we punch above our weight in terms of what we can produce in that small space.
Do you have a large design team? I know in the past you've worked with the likes of Arup and Tom Dixon.
Initially, we had no design team. And so we were always collaborating with large designers that liked what we did. We were very lucky. Yeah, Tom Dixon, our neighbor, when he was still at Portobello Dock, who is a local of W10 and, passionate supporter of the North Kensington community, offered to design a collection for us, which was wonderful, which we launched at London Design Festival. Wow, 7 years ago. Incredible. And since, yes, Arup as well, they actually approached us amazingly. And we're looking for a circular economy partner to create a collection initially from glass bottle waste through the Crown Estates. And in the end, it pivoted to actually, let's look at our plastic bottle waste, milk bottle waste from their offices. And this was back in the day when we were a bit more multi-material. We've focused a lot more. So yes, we did collaborate with a lot of designers at the beginning when it was really just throwing things at the wall, seeing what would stick. And in 2018 was the first moment that we hired our first designer in-house. And since then have grown that design team to 3 designers that straddle many other roles. I mean, they're not designing in isolation. They're project managing. They're managing the other makers and client management. They're in a small business. It's always many hats for one person.
Yeah. Do you still work with external designers or is it all done in-house?
We do occasionally. We haven't done a big collaboration with a big designer ever since we brought a lot of the design in-house because we felt that it was important for us to establish what is Goldfinger, establish our own aesthetic signature and our design principles before you start collaborating with someone, because otherwise it's just, in the past, it really was just the big designer saying, let's do this. And we were the fabricator. Whereas over the last 4 to 5 years, we've really tried to establish ourselves as a designer. And so we've done less on the collaborations with collections, but what we have been doing is collaborating with architects and interior designers to develop really beautiful products like the Tate collection, like the Inhabit collections, which have been done in partnership with Holland Harvey. We've partnered with Nicola Harding on the interior design side to deliver some office furniture for a really cool business called Scape. So yes, collaboration is very much, and partnership is at the heart of our business model and is very much how we've grown.
Very good. I mean, the workshop is obviously the lifeblood of the organisation. And of course, as a result, the showroom makes complete sense. But as you've alluded to, you're also fascinated with food. So why set up the cafe in the first instance?
So yeah, the cafe was always part of the plan. It's not something that came later or that we thought this is a good idea, let's do it. It's a mixture of 2 things. One, I'm half French, half Chinese. I'm obsessed with food. So that's a big influence. I think food is an incredible connector of people. I think it's how a lot of decisions are made and a lot of connections are started. And we also felt that this was, as a result, the best way to be welcomed into this community. We were outsiders coming into a very tightly knit community that is North Kensington, and that we wanted to have something that was for everyone. We realized that our furniture wasn't affordable to everybody, and that could be very alienating to have this sort of design-led thing that with very expensive furniture, even though in the early days it was more vintage furniture, but nevertheless, there were 2 markets, 2 audiences. And the cafe really was what we wanted that to be, a place where everyone was welcome, where everybody could have a cup of coffee and have a lovely plate of food, simple, homemade. It took a while to find the right partner, but we have had this partnership with our Italian chef, Panella, for the last 7 years, actually, the same time we did the collection with Tom Dixon. It was a big year for us. And they have really made that place a community hub and a place of coming together for the community, which is really lovely to see.
Because didn't you start doing residencies, like chef residencies?
Exactly.
Yeah, how did that work?
Initially, it was a pop-up sort of model. And in fact, with him, it was meant to be a pop-up, but it's just worked so well that we kept going on and going on. And the idea was, in the social enterprise model, was that we would give them a fully serviced restaurant space. And in exchange, they would run our charitable initiative, which is our once a month community meal.
Yes.
So that was really the model. And so the first few years, we went through at least 7 businesses. One of them has actually gone on to do lots of great things. It's called Redemption. It's an alcohol-free place that I think has a place in Covent Garden now. Many of them were just one-man band, sort of Moroccan cafe or Jamaican chicken shop. I mean, we went from everything, and we just needed to find that sweet spot. It was quite turbulent to have to keep changing the chef.
But it must be quite confusing as well for your potential client.
Exactly. It didn't work. And we realized we need someone who can really stick with this and really deliver consistent service and quality of food. And so it's been a match made in heaven ever since we found Penella. And I believe you've had the food there. And so
very nice it was too.
Can attest to that fact. And everybody loves Italian food. So
yeah. What's not to like? Should we talk about the People's Kitchen?
Yes.
Because it's cropped up on a number of occasions in the time we've been speaking. It was set up, according to your website, to tackle food waste and social isolation. So how do you go about doing that? What does it do?
So once a month, every third Sunday of the month, there's a very specific cadence to this. We collect surplus food from local bakeries, restaurants, farmers markets, any food establishment that might have food surplus. We prefer calling it surplus than waste in the food department. And we then cook up a meal all together, volunteer run, led by our chef. It used to be me doing it behind the scenes on a Sunday. We cook up a feast, and from 5:00, the doors open and anybody can come and have a free meal. And everybody sits around this one big long table. We can have about 50 or 60 people at a time, and we invite local musicians, any sort of entertainment. We often have, flowers, and it's a really elevated dining experience. It's like a restaurant, and really being able to give that experience to people who couldn't necessarily afford it is a really wonderful thing, and to share a meal with our neighbors. And it's become a real meeting point for a lot of our neighbors who come, who really is the most important date in their diary. They look forward to it, not just because of the food. The food's great, but it's because of the social connection and the chatting, the having a forum where they can come in, and it's entirely free. So it's got a special place in our hearts.
I hope you're enjoying the episode. This is just to remind you that the Material Matters Fair is nearly here. The event, which is headline sponsored by the British lighting company Burt Frank, runs from the 20th to the 23rd of September at London's Barge House, Oxo Tower Wharf. It will be full of brilliant ideas and wonderful exhibitors. Picking out names is invidious. However, here goes. Solid Wool creates material from the wool of the Herdwick sheep, and Magnus Long's studio will be launching a new wooden suspension light. Modern Synthesis is a biotech company which brings new materials to life. There will be a slew of international exhibitors working in a variety of materials, such as hydro and regular concrete. Meanwhile, the likes of Biomatters, Silk Lab, Mycelium Lab and Material Magic will be illustrating how design can work with nature. If craft is your thing, then look out for work by the likes of Anna Bridgewater, also known as Abalon, Mixed Metals, Gareth Neal, leather expert Bill Amberg and The Wicker Story. And there are features from the likes of our Designer of the Year, Pearson Lloyd. Danish designer Tanja Kirst will have her extraordinary textiles made from hemp and citrus peel in our entrance hall. The Wood Awards will be unveiling its shortlist, while Insight Publishing has put together the Workspace, a space that showcases the latest and most innovative thinking on sustainable office design, circularity and innovation. It's being designed by Area, and look out for brands including Flock and Matter. And finally, Isola, the Milan-based design platform, will host a new exhibition on the third floor of Barge House. Nothing Happens If Nothing Happens will feature emerging designers using regenerative resources and repurposing waste materials. And did I mention there's a talks programme featuring Michael Young and the always lively Negroni Talks and a bunch of other brilliant stuff? I thought not. It's terribly exciting, and it's also free for trade. You just need to register by going to our website, materialmatters.design. There's also an Eventbrite link in the blurb that comes with this episode. See you there. Is there a relationship between the people that buy your high-end furniture and then your People's Kitchen? Do the two different, I guess, very different groups meet?
A lot of the people who buy the furniture come and volunteer very often, or donate food or money to the running of it. So yes, no, there is a lot, and often we'll come and sit and eat. And we really do invite everybody to come and sit down and eat. And so it's really lovely to see conversations. And a lot of our clients, the clients of our furniture will say, it's one of the most heartwarming and kind of life-affirming experiences they've had. A lot of people bring their children to come and experience what it's like. And during COVID, we had to pivot this fabulous thing to being a meal delivery service.
Well, I was going to say, presumably this model had to change during the pandemic. How did it change?
Well, March 2020 crept up and thought, oh my, most of our beneficiaries are elderly, often quite frail. There's absolutely no way we can gather them. So we cancelled March, but then realized we were removing a vital service. Food poverty and social isolation were spiraling out of control, especially in our part of the borough. And so we got our minds together, our board, our advisors, our fantastic network of clients, and managed to fundraise enough to pivot to being a meal delivery service. Got our chef on board. He said, okay, if it's all the same meal, and, at this point, it wasn't about the food waste, I can make about 200, 250 meals every Sunday. And so we did it as a weekly Sunday dinner.
Oh, weekly. Wow.
Weekly during the national lockdowns. And so that went on for quite a while. And that really also was a very rewarding experience for a lot of the volunteers who, can be so removed from the reality of how people live. Some people live in London, and to be able to have these wonderful conversations with these very interesting people who have lived in the Trellick Tower since it opened and have seen the neighborhood change and have all these incredible stories. And we realized that part of the service wasn't actually just dropping off the food and running away to your next door, but actually having a chat, because we realized some of them really just wanted to have a chat and would want to chat for 15 minutes. And so that was very much the brief to all the volunteers, is don't rush the delivery, chat, sit there 10 minutes, have a chat with them on the doorstep. So it became, doorstep chats was equally valuable. And some of them, the beneficiaries shared that we were the first person they saw that week, which was very sad, but also very, glad to be able to have a small impact on their lives. So so that's always invite anybody. The volunteering is it's always getting fully booked. It's now a privilege to come and volunteer at the People's Kitchen.
So the final element of what you do in this extraordinary organization is the Academy. So tell me, how does that work? What do you do?
So it's evolved over time, but at the heart of it is our Future Makers program, which is really working with young people out of work and education, usually between the 16 to 29 age range, school leavers, either dropped out of school or at risk of dropping out of school, who are interested in carpentry, in making, in design, in woodworking. We realized through a lot of collaboration with a lot of other charitable organizations in the borough that there's not enough work experience. There's not enough opportunities for young people to actually have a go at being in the workplace and seeing what that job is like. So when people say, what do you want to be when I grow up? They don't know. And sometimes people have an idea and then they do it. And they're like, I really don't like that. I don't want to be, in front of a computer, or I do want to be in front of a computer, or whatever it might be. And to really give these young people. So we host a traineeship 3 times a year. It's a week-long, intensive, hands-on experience where they really come away having practical experience in designing, in making, in working very closely with one of our makers to realize a stool or to build an A-frame. So there's it's amazing to watch their evolution. Even by day 3, it's sort of total transformation from day 1.
How many do you take in?
We take in up to 10. Yeah,
Right.
You're usually around 5, but it's quite small groups to give them the attention. And it's really, having as much one-on-one contact with each of them. So up to maybe 30 a year.
Wow. And have any stayed on with you?
Yeah, we've had many that come back. We had one who was a full-time employee for a while and then continued on as a freelancer. And many of them come back to work with us, which is great, whether, part-time or fixed term. But we've had many of them come back. Well, the main thing that's also very important is keeping that community alive of the Goldfinger Academy alumni and having regular check-ins. How are they doing? How we can help them, signpost them, because it's very much about career guidance and what we can do. We can't employ them all, but we can help introduce them to people, help them with their CV, help them with any confidence building that might be needed. There's a lot of pastoral support as well, the kind of emotional, and then it's not just the technical side and off you go. It's a very lovely community. We actually have our fundraiser for this Goldfinger Academy every year. And this year is also our 10-year anniversary. So we're having a big party for it, which should be really fun. And we hope to raise funds to be able to do more of this going forward. So it should be great because we'll do an online silent auction as well on our website, featuring a lot of great experiences from design consultations with interior designers to dinner at Soho House and all sorts of fun things. So the auction is actually going to go live during Material Matters. So do stay tuned.
Oh, very good. I'm glad to hear it. Very happy for you to plug that. That's absolutely fine. Should we get into your background, Marie? Because you've said you're half French, half Chinese. You spent time, obviously, in rural Hong Kong, but also in Paris. So what did your parents do? Am I right in thinking your father was in luxury?
That's right.
That's the area you started in as well,
It
right?
is.
You were initially in the luxury
Exactly.
world. So was that always going to be your pathway?
So I always grew up in that. I grew up in that world. My dad started out at L'Oréal and then ended up at Guerlain and LVMH. And so very much that world of mostly in Hong Kong, but yes, initially in Paris.
But doing what for those brands?
Doing marketing initially and then moving up into general management. So more on the business side than on the creative side. So I followed in his footsteps and thought marketing was great because it brings together creative and more data-driven business because I loved both and couldn't choose one. And so I started out in marketing in various different brands like Shanghai Tang, which was part of the Richemont group at the time, and then Estee Lauder and LVMH as well. And always in marketing and product development, so more in fashion and beauty. Very different. And if you told my 18-year-old self that I'd be a social entrepreneur working the circular economy, I would have been like, what are you talking about? And in the design and architecture world, are you sure? Are you sure? It wasn't the obvious path, but there is a thread that runs through my trajectory, which is, I think, aesthetics, beauty. And then I sort of felt a strong calling to do that in a way that was possibly more in line with my values, less resource intensive, more local, taking care of, the well-being of the planet and the people and the communities that we work with. So that's what Goldfinger's just been a big experiment in that.
Was it clear you were always going to run things as a child? I remember you telling an anecdote on YouTube, or at least I found an anecdote on YouTube about how you used to organise who had the crayons in your nursery school.
That's right.
Is that true?
Apparently It is true. My mother loves to tell this story and embarrass me. I don't know if she's proud or embarrassed, maybe a combination of both. She's quite entrepreneurial herself, actually, being the Chinese one of my parents. My father was French. And yes, apparently in nurseries, I think I was only about 2. It really started quite young. I was collecting all the crayons, distributing a good amount to each child, but then keeping all the rest for myself. So such is the story. But yeah, so there was a sense of equity, but there was definitely a sense of wanting to run things and wanting to delegate. And I think I did always know I was always very entrepreneurial and sort of scrappy. I started a babysitting business when I was 11.
11? You were babysitting at 11? Who was letting you do this?
Believe it or not, I actually started babysitting at 9. And I think about this. And there are my parents' friends who I still, I said, do you realize you left me with your 1-year-old son when I was 9? Like, you didn't seem 9. You were so mature. You were so responsible. And it seemed like and I'm like, and they think about it now. But yeah, no, so my babysitting experience started at 9. And then at 11, I thought I was seasoned enough to start a business because I was getting too busy. And my parents only allowed me to babysit on Fridays and Saturdays because I needed to be focused for school. And so I thought, well, I better delegate all the weekday jobs to some of my friends. And
hopefully to older friends.
No, same friends, same age friends. Same age, no. And everyone was completely fine with it. I think maybe times have changed. I think people now don't.
I think they have. I hope they have.
Don't trust their 6-month-old with an 11-year-old. But I did, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So anyway, didn't think I was going to continue, but there was a sense of I loved the being independent, being able to have my own money to go shopping with. I mean, it's not like I'm very lucky to not need to, but it just, there was a sense of pride and wanting to be able to buy my own things and that sense of independence, which really drove me. So yes, funny anecdotes from my childhood.
So why did you decide to make the change from luxury to social enterprise? Was there a Damascene moment? There were many
that all cascaded. So, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment. I do remember one moment when I worked in luxury and I was working in beauty at the time, and I didn't work in the store. And I remember in one of my performance reviews, one of the feedback I got was, I wasn't wearing enough makeup to work. And I thought, wow, what am I doing here? The value alignment was just so out of whack. It didn't matter that the work, that was being done was good. It was that the makeup levels weren't high. And I actually have never been someone who likes wearing a lot of makeup and quite enjoy looking my natural self. And that clearly wasn't being valued. And it just really made me realize I need to get out of here. So that was a bit of a first wake up moment. I actually then went into the tech industry. I went into a tech startup for 4 years. So it's not like I jumped ship immediately. I was always very aware that I was entrepreneurial, but I wanted to learn from bigger organizations, from people more experienced than me. I still, I felt at 22, 23, I had no idea what I was doing. I was very much in this, my 20s are about learning from others, and then I will see what I go and apply it to. And my co-founder was very kind of gung-ho in starting a business in sustainability and circular economy. And furniture just sort of happened by chance that he loved making and I loved trees. And it all kind of came together with my background in luxury as well.
I'm kind of interested in that, Marie, because, I mean, as you say, you started the business in 2013 with your then partner, Oliver Waddington Ball, who's credited on your website. And I'm just wondering what you both brought to the mix initially.
Yeah, we're very different personalities, but I think it really was a perfect combination at the beginning, because he's incredibly charismatic and incredibly visionary. I mean, he had the vision for the business in many ways as it is today. It stayed true to its ethics about really having a furniture business that is impacting environmentally and socially. And what he thought was this sweet spot is that wood allows you to do both at the same time. You're saving waste and it's a great material to train people on. Metal, there are other materials that are really, very tricky and dangerous. You can't just sort of have a go at training someone. So I think that was really the nugget. And then he was absolutely brilliant at setting up so many of the initial partnerships, getting the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea on board. And that's how we ended up in the space that we're at. So he was just incredible at doing a lot of that initial brand building and really selling the vision of really being able to talk big. But I think what I had, and perhaps in more because of my personality, but also because of my experience in the corporate world, is more detail orientation, more appreciation for numbers and data and process and structure and systems. So he was very much the right brain and I was the left brain. And so it worked really well to have those two very different skill sets at the beginning. And then I think once the idea got established, it is sort of that way where sometimes, there's the right person to start it, then there's the right person for the next phase. And then at some point, I won't be the right person either for the next stage. And so, understanding where your strengths are and knowing when to. And so Oliver decided to step back in 2017 and continue in the social enterprise world. And that's when I took over to sort of really put in place more of those structures and systems.
Yeah, I was going to ask how the organization has changed in those 10 years, because obviously, we've mentioned upcycling. I mean, you were working with different materials initially, then you hone in on wood. So yeah, how has it developed in those 10 years?
We went from being mixed material, material agnostic, anything will do, and really actually developing our material partner network so extensively to the point that we were becoming an above ground landfill. We were just saying, yes, we'll take it. Bloomberg is clearing out their office. Let's take it. No idea what we'll do with it. Take it. And I remember at the early stages of that going, oh no. It's great, but it's not. And this was a time when we had a lot more storage space underneath the Trellick Tower. The Trellick Tower, the whole length of it is about the size of a football field. And we had the whole ground floor pram shed storage of that at one stage, which is why we were able to say yes to everything, but we were using less than 10% of it. So we had to go through. So that was the saying no, learning how to say no to other materials and really focusing on wood.
Is that easy, learning how to say no?
No, it's very hard. It's harder than it seems, but then once you start, it's like a muscle. Once you start doing it, it becomes easier and easier. and you realize that, oh God, why was I saying yes to everything? But it does take courage because it feels counterproductive that by saying no, you're going to have more or do better. I think it's, again, very much part of the first 3 years are very much about saying yes to everything. You need to be open. You need to ideate and iterate, and it's chaos. It's not even organized chaos. And those were the chaotic years, but we figured out a lot what doesn't work and what does work. Then there's that refining, and we're still doing it. We still get told we do a lot. And I think there's still a process of learning how to say no with us. Are we a bespoke manufacturer? Are we a retailer? Are we a designer? Are we all of the above? And a lot of people still tell us, you do a lot. Yes, we do. and so there.
But are you happy to do a lot, or would you rather refine?
I think I'm ready to refine it. It's too much.
Okay.
Yeah, being perfectly honest. We do it all well, but we are spread so thin, and we are a small team at the end of the day. So I think there's definitely still some refinement to be done in our business model and who we are. But focusing in on the core of our business, the sweet spot has really been our partnerships with interior designers and architects. That really has been the wonderful creative process that comes from that. The architects and interior designers that know us and have worked with us, they don't think twice the minute they have a client that is talking about local sustainability, social impact, ESG, you name it. It's like immediately, let's work with Goldfinger. And it's such a joy to have these long-lasting relationships with individuals and companies that we've built over the last 10 years.
We're coming to the end of our time, but kind of always the final question on these shows is where do you think Goldfinger will go in the future? I mean, I'm kind of intrigued by how an organization based around localism, how do you grow? Or is growth even important to you?
I think, it's a question we pose ourselves all the time. What does growth look like for us? I mean, I think it's growth not for the sake of growth. It's growth to the point where it is a viable business model, and then it doesn't need to grow more. Can it be an inspiration? Can it be a model for other makers in other geographies to do the same? And then is there a kind of franchise model that perhaps allows a maker in New York to use New York locally felled trees to make some beautiful designs? So a client there. So that's one avenue. It could be that Goldfinger just becomes a designer and we then manufacture with local manufacturers in different places all over the world. Or it just stays a London brand that is, as you say, based around localism, and it's all about, local, or, within the UK. There are many avenues that we're exploring, and it's not yet clear which one it will be.
Interesting. I mean, in the immediate future, in fact, in the next few days when this is released, you'll have Material Matters, which we're delighted to have you on board. What will you be showing there?
You are so excited about the show, and we are going to be launching our new collection in collaboration with the Tate Modern. So that's super exciting. Designed in partnership with Holland Harvey Architects and the Tate. So it's called the Goldfinger Plus Tate Collection. I won't spoil it all, but there is a table, there is a bench, there is a stool, and there is a surprise element that is going to be part of this collection, because those elements are also seen at Tate, but there will be some new and exciting things revealed at Material Matters. And so really hope to meet I'm sure we're going to meet lots of great people, and so excited about that.
Well, it sounds like a really good reason to visit. Marie, that was great. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Grant. Real pleasure speaking to you.
To find out more about Marie and Goldfinger, go to goldfinger.design. My thanks go to the series and fair headline sponsor, the brilliant lighting specialist Bert Frank. You can find out more about them at bertfrank.co.uk. And you can see its products at the Material Matters Fair, which runs from the 20th to the 23rd of September at Barge House, Oxo Tower Wharf. It's free for trade, but it's vital that you register before you arrive. For more information on that, to find the other podcasts that I've done, and to sign up to our newsletter, go to materialmatters.design. And as ever, there are images from the interviews on our Instagram page, materialmatters.design again. Finally, this is really important too. If you've enjoyed listening and want to see this podcast flourish, then please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this from. And it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £2.50 a month, you can receive an invite to the private view of the Material Matters Fair, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you could offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message of the importance of materials, skill, craft and design to a whole new audience. Thanks very much for listening.